Welcome to the Junto Men's Podcast, where we take a deep dive into all things related to men. We explore how to go from good to great, from high performers, and also aim to provide a shining light if you're experiencing darkness in your life. Grab a pen and paper and enjoy the ride. I would imagine you are one of the foremost people in Newcastle, in particular, maybe the world,
That's not the world yet.
in research around happiness and implementing tangible tools and action points for businesses and organisations mostly, but specifically for individuals around creating more happiness in their life. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, well, we're getting there. So 10 weeks from now, the master's thesis will be submitted, and I'll be one of only 5 in Australia that have the master's degree in positive psychology.
Wow.
Who are working in the space. So yeah. So maybe not world yet, but starting to get up there as leading the field in Australia for happiness research.
Well, you'll be top 5 in Australia, obviously.
Yep.
So that obviously translates to probably top 1,000.
Hopefully.
Sweet. You're going to introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Yeah, definitely. Beautiful. Let's do it. I'm so envious of your guys' hoodies. I came straight from a bunch of corporate events I had on today, so I feel majorly overdressed and not as cozy as you guys are. So as Michael said, we've known each other for quite a few years. I'm a happiness researcher, which I suppose the first thing I need to answer that a lot of people get on their mind when I say that is, what the hell does that mean and how the fuck is that even a job? I had the same thoughts when I went into it. If anyone's familiar with a field of research called positive psychology, it's kind of jokingly called or colloquially called the science of happiness, and it was pioneered by a great man called Dr. Seligman over in the US in the late 90s, and he was elected to the head of the American Psychology Association and did one of the ballsiest things I've ever seen someone do in their professional life, which is, if you put yourself in his shoes, just been elected to lead an entire industry. His opening speech is, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for electing me. We've been doing this wrong for 100 years and we need to change." Like, ballsy move, like mic drop moment. And he said, look, 97% of our funding and research at the moment is to looking into quote unquote what is like wrong with people and how we fix them, and 3% goes into what's right with humanity and how we cultivate it. And that seems dramatically imbalanced. And so we pioneered this idea of we need to understand this really rigorous scientific process what it means to live a happy and fulfilling life, and to bring our happiest versions of ourselves to our communities, our families, our workplaces, and to the world as a whole. And thus positive psychology was born. So it's this really nice complement to the amazing rigorous work that traditional fields like therapy, counseling, and psychology have done, in their time, which is how do we help people go from feeling -10 to neutral and feel resilient in life and getting through life. But then it's complementing that by going, well, hey, there's more to life than just feeling resilient in the face of challenge too. We also need to look at how do we cultivate going from neutral to +10. How do we feel we're fulfilling our potential as individuals? How do we feel confident in ourselves as individuals? How do we feel like we're living a life that's fulfilling and meaningful? And these aren't necessarily new questions. We've been asking this really since the dawn of mankind. The ancient Greeks were the first to really argue about what it meant to live a happy life. But it's only been in the last 25 or so years that it's been studied as a science. I think that's what excited me about it, the way I ended up in it. A lot of people make the mistake of going, of course, this guy studies happiness. He seems like a pretty naturally chirpy bloke. Definitely wasn't the case for most of my life. I'm the first male in 5 generations now in a direct lineage on my dad's side to not be in the military or the police force. So if you want to talk about having a blueprint for a happy and successful life, mine was basically handed to me at birth. It was, if you want to be a good, successful, happy man in the Edwards household, you got good grades, you went to the military or the police force, or you bought yourself a little bit of time by going to uni, and then you go into the military or the police force. I reached year 12 and went, I know I don't want to be in the military or the police force, but I have no idea what I do want. So I'm going to buy some time by just enrolling at uni to see what happens. And in that time, went through the whole, I think a lot of us go through this in our early 20s as we're exploring what it means to live a more independent life outside of home, outside of direct influence from our family, and figuring out who the hell we are as individuals. And for me, because I'd had this blueprint for so long of like, this is a happy and successful life, when I was starting to shy away from that and go, well, maybe that's not the path for me, my biggest challenge was I had no other reference point. I see a lot of people in my research now in positive psychology that will gamble their happiness pursuing someone else's definition for a happy life rather than figuring out what their definition is for a happy life. And what that led to for me was getting stuck on something that I now know, looking back on it, after all the years of research I've done, the work I've done, something that we call in positive psychology the hedonic treadmill. And I guarantee we've all been on it before, and it's not fun, to be honest, the I'll be happy when trap. So I'll be happy when I change jobs, move house, get in a relationship, leave a relationship, have kids. I'll be happy when the kids finally move out of home because they're driving me out the wall. Like, we're always chasing happiness around this next bend. And it's a fickle little bastard because the closer you get to it, it moves. And it's like we're always chasing. And so for me, that led to having no clue what I wanted out of life or what my path was going to be, really struggling with self-doubt and self-esteem. I've been through quite a vivid period of anxiety in that time. And I found myself sort of chasing the hedonic treadmill. And I jumped onto, did the great move at the time of getting on social media with the new and big thing that everyone was jumping into. And so for me, I started seeing all these pictures of men online looking real happy and smiley by the beach with six-pack abs. And I went, that's why I'm not happy. I don't have abs and I'm not on the beach. And I joke about it now, but at the time, the idea of body dysmorphia in men or, challenges with eating, like disordered eating patterns and stuff was just massively under-researched. And what it led to me, I went, I'll be happy once I lose 5 kilos. Lost 5 kilos, wasn't happy yet. Okay, well, once I lose another 5, once I lose another 5. And then I was okay, well, now I need to put on more muscle. Now I need to, be a certain way fitness-wise. And it unfortunately led to a couple of years in and out of hospital with disordered eating and body dysmorphia, which again wasn't really recognized at the time in men. It was just not understood. So I remember the doctors at the time going, we have no idea why this guy's losing weight, because I didn't tell anyone about what I was going through. In my mind, I was like, well, I'm the only person being affected by this, so why does it matter? And I've since realized that turns out our own happiness or unhappiness makes a pretty profound ripple effect to those around us. And I can look back with much clearer eyes now and see the impact it had on my mom and on my partner at the time. And I remember one day, the doctor came in and was like, hey, we don't know why your son is so sick. They're talking to my mom. She was in the hospital ward with me. And they're like, we're going to start running tests for bowel cancer. We think maybe there's something going on there. Thankfully for me, no bowel cancer, but it was the first time I saw the direct impact. Like my mom had to process the idea of potentially losing her only son. And it was the first time I actually put my hand up and asked for help. And I was like, hey, I'm struggling here. I don't really know what I want out of life. I don't really know who I am. I feel like I've let down the family lineage. Like I'm really lost. Like I'm grasping here. And thank God I did, because it led to me being introduced to some great people. And one of those people in particular was a man called Sebastian Terry, who was originally from Sydney, now lives in the US. And he was the first kind of mentor or role model I had of a male figure really living a life that he'd intentionally shaped to align with his values, a life that he'd intentionally shaped to align with his definition of happiness and success, not someone else's. And I remember sitting down with him after we got introduced and we started forming a friendship, and he's like, so what do you want, mate? Like, why are you here? And I was like, well, I've got terrible internal self-talk, got really loud inner critic, I beat myself up a lot. So I guess I want to have more self-confidence, more self-worth, be kinder to myself, want to practice self-care more effectively and look after myself sustainably, not in the way I have been doing it physically. And he goes, okay, well, all those start with the same word. And I was like, okay, what do you mean? What's the pop quiz? And he's like, well, what's the word? I was like, self. And he goes, cool. Who's yourself? And I was like, I have no idea. Right, I said, that's why I'm here. He's like, man, you're trying to jump ahead to step 2. You want to have a confident relationship with yourself, but you have no idea who yourself is. So how can you be confident in someone you don't know? Right? You want to be more compassionate and caring towards yourself, but you don't know what you stand for and what your values are. It's like, we've got to come back to this core principle of bringing clarity to, and I do believe this even more now after doing positive psychology for the last 7 years, or my postgrad for the last 4. that there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all answer to a happy life. Like, there just isn't. There's some common threads and themes that we've found that I'm happy to share, but you've got to start going, what does my blueprint for a happy life look like to me? And then how much do I live in alignment with it? And that's hard work. Training your brain is an ongoing journey. But I started with Seb, and that led to some amazing opportunities over the years. We formed a really good friendship. I ended up climbing Everest Base Camp with him a week before I got married, which was a whole schmozzle to get back in time for the wedding. But that led to some other professionals and support. And over the years, I felt myself going, hang on, I'm actually handling my mind and emotions a lot better than I used to. This is so odd. It's like I've learned this new language that I've never been exposed to before. So I started peppering them with questions like, how the hell do you guys all know this? Like, I feel like I've missed out on something at some point, and you guys have this toolkit that I've never been exposed to. And every single one of them was like positive psychology. Look into it. It's this really cool field of research. So thankfully for me, I by this stage, I'd worked through my undergrad degree in health. I was working in the fitness industry originally at the time. And my fiance at the time, now my wife, we'd traveled the US for 8 weeks, got to the end of the trip, got into LAX airport, ready to fly back to Australia. And I turned to her and said, hey, I don't want to go back to my job in the fitness industry. I don't think that's what I'm meant to be doing. She goes, okay, that's fine. What are you going to do instead? And again, put yourself in her shoes. I think I want to start a happiness college. She's like, what in the world do you mean? I went, well, this work I've been doing on myself the last 3 or 4 years, it's really made a difference. I wish I learned it earlier. I wish there was a space where people could go, much like going to university, but they're going specifically for skills that make them a better, happier human, rather than focused on skills to get them a job and be a good employee. So you might have heard soft skills versus technical skills, like things like emotional intelligence, resilience, right? All the stuff I've been learning about. I was like, I wish there was just a central place where people could learn this. To her credit, she didn't say yes straight away. She said, let me think about it on the flight home, because it was a big ask, which got bigger when she said, how are we going to fund this? And I said, well, that house deposit we've been saving, we might need to live off that for a little while. But thankfully 7 years ago now, I came back, did my first postgraduate degree in positive psychology, and opened BU Happiness, or what would become BU Happiness College, which is, become something that I'm deeply proud of. We've got members and graduates now in 5 different countries. We've won multiple awards for social enterprise work. As Michael alluded to, over the last couple of years, we've been partnering with organizations and workplaces to help them measure happiness as a KPI, and recognize that a happy team is their greatest competitive advantage. But we started, and still to this day, the majority of our work is in individuals enrolling to come along and learn more about their mind and emotions and how to manage them more effectively, and build a really practical, tangible toolkit for how they can live a happier, more fulfilling life. And in doing so, we're a small team. We've got 6 staff, and we're all based in Newcastle, Central Coast, and Sydney. But our vision is to grow global happiness. And I think the way we're making it there is because we inevitably do spread a ripple effect. Like, I'm sure you all can agree and recognize that you're a better husband, friend, family member, colleague when you're happy and well, compared to when you're stressed, burnt out, and overwhelmed. Like, that's true for all of us. So when we can get on top of how we look after our mind and emotions, when we can get on top of living a happy, fulfilling, authentic life, it's actually not just about us. It's not just about our own happiness. It's the difference it makes that's much larger than all of us. I guess that's what's led to this point in my journey to now being 7 years down the line and 10 weeks away from a master's thesis submission. And I was actually just sitting there reading, I'm going to steal your South America on a shoestring budget, because my wife and I are taking a 4.5 month sabbatical as of October. After the 7 years of building, we're off to South America for 4.5 months together, and then see what the next chapter holds after that. So as the purpose for tonight is, I wanted to come in sharing a bit of my background and backstory, but then also giving you guys a bit of a framework of just some of the most foundational core skills that have come out of positive psychology research to go, hey, that's not overcomplicated. If we just do these things well, chances are you're going to be 20, 30, 40 steps ahead of the average person when it comes to living a happier, more fulfilling life. And then from there, I'll share those skills with you, and then I'll kind of just open the room to any questions that you guys have, any discussions you want to bring around happiness, positive psychology in my journey, my research. And hopefully everyone gets to leave tonight with a couple of extra tools in their toolkit. I'd be lying if I said I've got all the answers. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to a happy life. I'm not some happiness Buddha or guru, but I like to think over the years I've built up a pretty rigorous toolkit for how we can do this.
I did promise us the answers.
Yeah, I know. What a joke. What a joke. Why am I here? I wanted a single perfect silver bullet. And you've just told me I'm not going to get one. So have people heard of positive psych before tonight? Positive psych? Yeah, cool. Nice. That's awesome. It's starting to be more and more well known. One of the core foundational principles that's come out of it, which I love, is this idea that happiness is complex, right? It's not just sometimes I still do this, say people go, oh, happiness, what's the point of pursuing happiness? Isn't it a fleeting feeling? It comes and goes real quick. It's, mate, we've got to build a life about something more than just happiness. And I get it, but it's a misunderstanding when people come at that approach. What we found is there's these two underlying types of happiness. One is called, and if you go back to ancient Greece, this is literally the origins for both of these. The philosophers were talking about this. So one is hedonic happiness, based on the term hedonism, if anyone's familiar. Everyone loves a hedonistic lifestyle. Basically, this was the ancient Greek philosophers who went, the secret to a happy, fulfilling life: experience as much pleasure as possible with as little pain as possible. So in other words, the secret to happiness: sex, drugs, rock and roll. Like feast, drink, orgy, go to town, right? Why might that not be a sustainable long-term approach to happiness? I throw it to you guys.
Lack of meaning.
Lack of meaning, big one. What else?
Normally the things that are pleasurable have an after effect which is negative, and the opposite, the things that might feel hard to do in the first place, they have a pleasurable after effect.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so we have a bit of a come down period after these. Yeah, you guys are hitting the nail on the head. What they found is this hedonistic approach, so focusing on things that made you feel good, essentially. It's driven mainly by dopamine. Everyone's heard of dopamine in the brain. If we get sciencey for a moment. Big part of like a lot of addiction challenges and experiences is linked to dopamine. It's a very, very strong neurochemical. Our brain loves it. When we get it, it wants more. But two problems happen. One, exactly as you said, we have a come down afterwards. Second one is something called hedonic adaptation, which means our brain goes back for the more, but it doesn't get us to the same high as it got last time. We need to keep increasing the dose to get the same effect, which is why it's a big part of addiction. Right? And so what it leads to, the way to summarize it, if you build your happiness strategy just around hedonic happiness, you will have a fun but empty life. Right? So we're going to lack that meaning that you so accurately highlighted. On the flip side, there was this other group of philosophers, and that positive psychology is now, hundreds upon hundreds of years later, being like, oh, they were actually really spot on back then. Like all the science is coming back, showing they were onto something. There's this other side called eudaimonic happiness, which I wish they chose a better word because the bane of my existence is spelling that thing all the time. But essentially, this means contentment. Right, so it's a slower build happiness, it's steadier state, it doesn't have the high peaks and troughs, it takes longer to build up, but once it stays, it's a really nice little buffer. This is built more around things like connection, which is a big gap at the moment. I don't know if you guys are aware, but we're living through a weird period in human history where we're more connected than we've ever been, thanks to social media, but more people than ever are reporting feeling lonely. So there's this real gap in depth of connection, which is affecting this eudaimonic happiness. This is also built through contribution, so feeling like we're giving back to something bigger than ourselves. It's built through meaning and purpose, right? And so we can start to see these things that, exactly as you said, they're harder to build, but their tail effect is way better. They last way longer. Now, my argument, a lot of people, in the research start to go, well, of course we need to move more towards eudaimonic happiness. Interestingly, depending on the culture you're from or the country, and so a lot of Eastern countries have a much more collective eudaimonic definition of happiness. A lot of Western capitalistic countries, very much based on achievement, which is more hedonic. So achievement, output, chasing the next goal. What we find now in the research is, I jokingly call it the old El Paso taco strategy because of that ad, hard shell taco versus soft shell taco, which one's better? I was like, well, pecan or sauce, we need both. It's the same with this, right? So what they're finding now is if you just pursue contentment and eudaimonic happiness, you will live a purposeful but bland life, is what they summarize it as. So I think as a starting point, it's a really good strategy for people to go, well, what's my unique blend going to be? Right, at this stage in my life, they do find that over time, as we age, we tend to lean a little more into eudaimonic, which is interesting. But I'm sitting at a point now where it's like, if I put about 80% of my focus on looking after my happiness as an individual, on what brings me a sense of meaning, purpose, connection, contribution, right, that contentment type happiness, and then I top up with 20% of what's really fun and it's exciting for me and it's enjoyable and it's pleasurable, or I feel a rush of accomplishment from it, that's a really nice blend. And I can start to feel when I'm a bit out of whack with that. Sometimes I jokingly call it your inner monk versus your inner CEO. Right, the CEO is that more hedonic, achievement, outcome oriented. You're in amongst more that, how do I be content and fulfilled where I am right now? And so as a starting point, I encourage everyone, when we start teaching positive psychology, is like, start thinking about your blend between contentment and joy, because they're both needed and you're going to have your own idea about what that looks like. Yeah. The second thing I'll share with you guys tonight before we open up to a bit of Q&A or open discussion about all this is, as much as I say there's not a one-size-fits-all secret to happiness, in a way there is from positive psychology, but you get to define what each step means. So what I mean by that is they've found 6 distinct ingredients that go into the recipe for a happy and fulfilling life. And the thing I love about positive psych is, a lot of fields of science, their sample sizes, they're lucky if they get 500 people in a test. A lot of the founding researchers of positive psych said all of our things that we're going to work on to better understand what it means to live a thriving, fulfilling life are going to be free for everyone, to the public. Like, you can go to, if you go to AuthenticHappiness.org, all of their tests and tools are there for free. You just go to town with it. And as a result of it, they just ask, hey, if you're going to do it, can we include you in our sample for testing these? And so rather than having a sample size of 500 people to test interventions on, some of them, like the character strengths test, are now up to like 2.5 million people. So they've just got a way better sample who does this work. Like, does this make a difference in people's lives? What they've found is this 6-step thing that just appears universally applicable. And normally what will happen is when you go through the 6 ingredients of happiness, you'll go, I do these ones pretty well. These ones used to do well, but maybe I've neglected them for a bit. And these ones I bloody suck at it, I've got to get a lot better with. And that kind of gives you your starting point. To go, okay, well, I'm going to work on getting better at this, and I'm going to double down on what I'm doing well. And there's your starting point for living a happy life. So the 6 stages are, the acronym is PERMA, way nicer than eudaimonic happiness, for spelling. So the first one, P, is positive affect. Now, that's a sciencey term that just means, and be prepared to be shocked by how stupidly simple it is. I roll my eyes every time I teach this when we go on speaking tours, but they found, hey, people live happier lives the more often they do things that make themselves feel good. It's like, no shit, right? But as much as I laugh at that and go, the simplicity is stupid, I mean this. We teach these fundamental concepts when I go on speaking tours, like throughout Australia, throughout the US, we've done these speaking tours. The amount of times where I say to a room, hey, how often do you under-prioritize or neglect doing things that make you feel good? And every hand in the room goes, yeah, actually, I put everyone else's needs ahead of my own. I don't prioritize doing things that I know are good for me. So as much as I laugh at its simplicity of like positive affect is identify the stuff that makes you feel good, do more of it. I think there's something beautiful in that simplicity of we need to be reminded to actually prioritize that, because a lot of us forget to, or we feel it's selfish to, right? We've all had this idea of like everyone's needs come before our own. If we prioritize our needs, we're selfish. Actually, all the science and positive psychology shows the opposite. We spoke before about how you're the best version of you when you're looking after yourself. So I think the most selfish thing any of us can do is actually rob our loved ones in our community of getting to know the best us. And you can put it back to the acronym of, or the analogy of, on the plane, they don't say in the case of an emergency, oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling, put everyone else's on before you put yours on, otherwise you're a selfish jerk. Right? It's just not part of the briefing. Put yours on first and then help others. And that's, at BU we teach the difference between traditional selfishness versus healthy selfishness, right? Healthy selfishness is I will prioritize looking after me for the benefit of those around me because I'm a better leader, I'm a better friend, I'm a better husband. So that's the kindest thing I can do for my loved ones. Traditional selfishness is I'll put myself first at the expense of others. We don't want more of that. Right? That would be like I've put my oxygen mask on and now I'm kicking back and watching the in-flight movie whilst everyone around me is suffocating. Right? Not what we need in life. So we need to first bust this idea of like putting your needs as a priority is selfish. It's the exact opposite. So that's P, identify what makes you feel good, do more of it, and do it without feeling guilty because you recognize it is of service to others. The E in the recipe is something that stands for engagement and flow. Anyone heard of flow theory before? Or cool. So flow theory was pioneered by a positive psychologist who has the most complex name in the history of names. It's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Look up the spelling of it. It's terrifying. But he started researching. He actually did it in athletes originally, accidentally. He was looking at tennis players and other athletes who were doing interviews after games where they performed really, really well. And the interviewer was like, "Can you explain what happened there?" And they're like, "I have no idea." Right? Because they're not consciously aware when they're in it. They're in this flow state where things just happen as second nature. And so he found in that first, and he went, interesting, people perform better when they're in flow. Then he started seeing it in executives and CEOs. Then he started seeing it in day-to-day people doing day-to-day activities. And he went, this is odd. What he was looking for was it's linked to performance, which you perform better when you're in flow. But what they stumbled across was actually people who experience flow more often in their life rate their lives as happier. They rate themselves as more fulfilled. And so engagement and flow exists. Actually, I'll show you on a bit of paper. And this really weird intersection between skill on one side and challenge on the other. Right? So what they found, if we have, let's use the example of sport. Let's say we're playing some table tennis out there. Are you good at table tennis?
I think you'll be better than me.
Okay, well, let's go with that. Okay, let's say I'm great at table tennis, right? I'm the Roger Federer of table tennis. Michael's a bit rusty, hasn't played for a while.
Curiosity.
Yeah, so I'm just crushing him, right? Eventually, how's Michael going to feel if he's just getting crushed every round? What's the outcome, likelihood, emotionally? So this is really high challenge.
Cranky.
He's going to get cranky. So it's right. It's low skill, high challenge. He's going to get frustrated. He's probably going to get overwhelmed at some point, right? Yeah, we'll get angry, right? So that all sits in this little section down here. Low skill, high challenge. How am I going to feel if I'm just crushing him every turn? Bored. So high skill, low challenge, bored, flat, apathetic. Sometimes they call this distinction feeling flat or fucked or frazzled. Frazzled's the technical term that they use in literature because they can't put fucked in the paperwork. Yeah, you're either going to feel pretty fucked or you're going to feel really flat. Right? And in the middle, specifically at high skill, high challenge, is this state of flow. Right? So flat, flow, fucked. Right? To get there, we need to focus on putting ourselves in challenging situations that are just the right degree of challenge, but also that require our best skills. Now, the way to find out your best skills, I'm going to encourage everyone to do this like straight after tonight. Go home. It's like a 25-minute test. It's free. Go to VIA Character Strengths. So VIA Character Strengths.
We did it last week. Not with these guys.
No, man, perfect. Okay, cool. So
talk about it last week.
VIA Character Strengths. It's a free test, positive psychology test. It will spit out. So they've found these internal 24 traits that like are good human being qualities. It's going to spit out, hey, here's your top 5 that you just do naturally well. Like you're just bloody good at them. And what we found in the research is often when we work on ourselves, particularly as men, we work on ourselves from a deficit mindset of I need to correct my weaknesses. All the research from positive psychology is going back is actually you're better off doubling down on your strengths. Like you get more out of doubling down on what you do inherently well. And you'll feel the gap when you're not utilizing them, right? So everyone in our team knows each other's character strengths and we can recognize and honor when we see them come up. I know my wife's character strengths. When I see them, I celebrate her for that. When we're feeling disconnected from them, we can call it out. It's kind of like a cheat code to your values, essentially, or like what you do exceptionally well. If you can put yourself in situations and you go, hey, how do I use those skills? How do I use those strengths in this situation at work or in this situation in my relationship or in this situation in my life? You're massively more likely to get into this flow zone. It's like a cheat code to get there quicker. Right? So please find your top 5 strengths. Yeah. So that's the E, that's flow. Third one is R, which is relationships. Right. Again, we spoke before about how we're living in a time when more people than ever are reporting feeling lonely. We are a social species. It's that simple. I used to very much believe when I was first starting this research that happiness is built within. Happiness is an inside job. And I think it's true that happiness starts within, but by God, is it also true that it's magnified between people, right? Whether that be social support, whether that be community, friends, like I always think of doing the internal work is planting the seeds of happiness, but if you've got to water them, you're going to need people in your corner. Professionals, family, friends, loved ones, doesn't really matter who it is, but form good relationships. If anyone's been following, there's been a long study they've been doing on health and happiness. They're doing the longest running study on what determines how good of a life we have in the later stages of our life. The number one contributor they've found so far that ranks above everything else, how good are the quality of your closest relationships? That outpaced exercise, that outpaced smoking. It was more determinant than anything. Now, those things all matter. Please don't just be like, okay, well, I'm going to have great relationships and drink like crazy and smoke real hardcore and then I'm going to have a great end of life. Probably not. But I think relationships is one we often undervalue. We over-focus because it's complex, it's messy. Adding more people into your life inherently comes with risk, requires vulnerability, right? So it's hard. But it is really important. The last 3. So 4th one is M, meaning and purpose. This comes straight back into that eudaimonic line. Now, this doesn't mean you need to answer the big question, what is the purpose of your life? But hell, if you can, happy days, go for it. Right? This is more, can you find the moments of meaning and purpose in your day-to-day activities? You guys remember it all? There was a video that went viral a few years ago of I think he was an admiral in the US Navy who was saying he made his bed every morning. Remember this guy? Yeah. Do you remember why he made his bed every morning?
Nothing else, because the rest of the day went to shit.
Yep. So he comes back to a nice spot. He's accomplished something to start the day. It's something in his control. So the act of making his bed had so much meaning in it. Now, this is the reason I love this model, this PERMA model. You get to decide what gives you positive affect. You get to decide what your strengths are from that test and put yourself in situations that use them. With meaning and purpose, guys, I tried making my bed every morning for 2 weeks. It means nothing to me. It means jack shit, right? Much to my wife's disappointment. She was so excited. And I was like, this means nothing to me. It's just not something that adds value to my life. I don't care about it. But I get meaning and purpose in many other ways. Weirdly enough, I find washing dishes really meaningful. I know it's strange. I find it very mindful as a practice. So whatever that guy got out of making the bed, I seem to get out of doing dishes. So that's how it falls. But if you
that probably makes your life happy though.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that does. Especially because when we first met, she was a award-winning desserts chef. So she's way better at cooking the food than I am. I'm better at eating it and cleaning up afterwards. So. But yeah, if you can go, hey, this is what brings a bit of meaning and purpose into my life. Double points if it's something that makes an impact to someone other than you. So if you want to cheat for that, to find a quick way to go, what do I want to be part of? Look up the United Nations Global Goals. People much smarter than probably all of us combined have dedicated their life to going, what are the challenges humanity needs to solve this century? Otherwise, we're screwed. And they came up with 17 very clear goals. These are 17 things we must achieve this century as a species. And so if you can find things that give meaning and purpose in your life and contribute to one of those goals, your sense of meaning and purpose will go through the roof. You'll feel like you're playing part in something bigger than yourself. Our second last one, which is actually, if you look up the PERMA model, this will be the last one you see. And the reason I'll teach you the 6th is because it's currently going through the literature review and I'm betting my left leg it's going to get approved. So I'll give you guys a sneak peek of what's coming in the pipeline of research.
I just thought you couldn't do that.
No, there's 6 ones, but if you look up PERMA, you'll only see 5. So A is our second last one, which is achievement and accomplishment. It is still important to do things that give us a sense of achievement and pride in ourselves. The best way you're going to get this is by goal setting, whether it be micro goals as what do I want to accomplish today, having a bit of a to-do list that you tick off, or longer term goals that are more challenging, setting yourself targets, setting yourself challenges, doing things that you work towards and achieve gives us that boost of achievement and accomplishment. So if you're not currently seeing goals, highly recommend doing it. Important. And then our last one, which I'm betting my left leg on. So we reconnected a few years' time and I'm missing a left leg. That's the bet's gone horribly wrong. But it's currently going through the review. Again, this is a recipe for what makes people happy in life. They're currently proposing that they're going to add in health. Yeah, I can back that argument. We're finding more and more now the links between mental and emotional health and physical health. They're very interconnected, very tightly intertwined. So, learning how to look after our nutrition and get good sleep and rest and recovery and moving our body in ways that we enjoy and challenging ourselves physically, not just good for our physical health, but genuinely good for our mental and emotional health and our sense of happiness, which is why I'm very confident making the bet that this is going to be approved when it comes through the full literature review. So again, as a starting point, 2 types of happiness. Funnily enough, when you look at the 6 points in the recipe, you can probably see how they hit more that hedonic or more that eudaimonic. The achievement and accomplishment, that's more hedonic. Meaning and purpose, that's more eudaimonic. So like those 6 actually hit both, which is really nice. And so as a starting point for learning how to manage our mind and emotions more effectively, learning to be more intentional with our happiness, I'd come back to that as like a basic blueprint. And then you get to add detail to it. You get to go, hey, this is what brings me a sense of joy in my life. This is what goals matter to me that I'm working towards. The chance that you can already look at that and go, oh yeah, I do these ones pretty well. These ones I need to get a bit better at. How are we going for time?
Yeah, great.
Gorgeous. Great time.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
27, so.
The last one I'll add in before we do Q&A and just open discussion about anything to do with this sort of space is what has arguably been the most impactful intervention or technique or tool that we've found in the research, which is obnoxiously simple and free and takes like 10 minutes a day at most. I tell it to people and they roll their eyes because they've heard of it before, but I'm like, you're probably not practicing it well. It's a regular gratitude practice. So be it gratitude journaling, whatever it may be. They found crazy things like changes in people's self-reported happiness of up to 40% after 12 weeks. Like if there was a pill that made people 40% happier in 12 weeks, it would be the most prescribed thing in the world. Like it's insane the differences that this makes. But there's a certain way to do it well. Right? So first and foremost, accept the fact that you're probably going to hate it when you start doing it. It's like any new skill, you're going to fuck it up a lot. Like I've never met someone who picked up a guitar for the first time and then was upset when they weren't Jimi Hendrix in the first strum. But when it comes to practicing internal skills for our mind and emotions, people get the shits when they don't get it straight away. I was the same. I hated meditation for 3 years because I wasn't good at it, right? It just wasn't for me. But it's like, no, I just sucked at it. I didn't like that. Same with gratitude practice. You're going to suck at it for a bit. The next thing we need to do is set ourselves up for success with it by using some sort of template. It's pretty daunting to stare at an empty page at the end of a day, especially one that's gone pretty shit, and go, what am I grateful for today? Like, good luck, right? Your brain's too busy focused on what went horribly. So I always use prompts. My favorite 3 that I go to is what is a small moment today that went well that I'd normally take for granted. So I'm trying to find the little wins in a day. Right? My second one, who is someone I'm grateful for today and why? It can be really meaningful, like, parent or a partner, or it could be someone that I just had a very fleeting interaction with. There was just a nice interaction. That helps with that connection part we spoke about before. And the last one's the hardest, but the most valuable, which is why I build up to it with the first 2. What's something about myself I'm grateful for today? Right? Now that can be physical or it can be a personality trait. If you've got a rough relationship with yourself, that's why I say it's normally the hardest. So we build towards it. You almost want to do your warm-up reps with the first 2 and then get to your max lift on the third one. And then to make it even more impactful, you've got to put for each of those 3 why you chose that answer. So if you just write a small moment I was grateful for was, I really enjoyed breakfast this morning. Like, cool, yes, in a way, you're training your brain to focus on what's good rather than what's bad, but you're not going to really marinate in it. I talk about this as like marinating or simmering in the juices of gratitude. Like if you want your brain to actually release the neurochemicals that make you feel happier, you need to spend a bit of time in it. And so adding like, this is why I was grateful for breakfast this morning, right? It was something that was really healthy and that I made for myself to nourish myself. I ate it mindfully and didn't have my phone on me. And, my dogs were running around trying to grab stuff off the plate. So that was a nice little moment, right? It starts to really amplify it. And so I always say to people like, if you just do, and look, anytime, as someone who studies behavior change, anytime I say to someone, do something daily, the metric of success is 80%, because we're all human, right? You're going to forget days. You're going to not feel like it some days. That's fine. But 80% is kind of the metric of success for any of these things to work. So, you know, five-ish days out of 7 in a week, if you have a journal by your bed or a note in your phone, doesn't matter which, and you just go, this is a small moment I was grateful for today, this is why, this is someone I'm grateful for today, this is why, this is something about me that I'm grateful for today, this is why. You can repeat them if you want, but the more you mix it up, the better. That 12 weeks of doing that, your brain starts to get trained to not just focus on what's wrong or difficult or challenging in life, but what's right. The reason we need to train our brain to do that is because this shocks people when I tell them it, because I spend my life studying happiness. Your brain doesn't give a shit if you're happy. And that's not its priority. Our brains are wired for survival. And so if you go back thousands of years, it was advantageous to have a worst case outcome thinking brain. If you were in the long grass and you heard a rustle, all the natural optimists were like, oh, that's my friend Ted from next door. They died. Like, they didn't pass on their genes. And the people who went into fight or flight straight away did. And so we've still got that brain in many ways. We're all born with a brain that's like, what's the threat? What could go wrong? Where am I fucking up? How do I make things better? Right? It's doing that for a good reason. It's trying to keep us alive. It's just not all that beneficial if we want to be happy. And so we need to train it to do the other side, which thankfully we can. There's something called neuroplasticity, which is training and rewiring the brain. It's like training muscles. But you need to be consistent with it. Right? You need to give it enough time to work. So on top of those things we spoke about with like figuring out your blueprint for happiness with the eudaimonic and happiness stuff, figuring out each of those 6 stages of the PERMA model, if you can do some form of gratitude practice. If you don't like writing, like I wasn't into journaling very much, so I use an app called Otter. It's free. You can speak into it. So sometimes whilst I'm driving home, I'll just press go on Otter and I'll just talk about what went on in my day. And it transcribes it all. And then you can go back later and look at things that went well. It'll actually categorize how often you're choosing certain things. It's really cool. It's free as an app. Otter, like the animal. I don't know why I do that when I talk about Otter. I don't know if otters ever do this, but in my head they do. Every time I recommend Otter, I do this subconsciously. So Otter is a gratitude practice.
Do otters have legs or?
Yeah, otters have little. No, otters have little hands, don't they?
Paws.
Paws. Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Geez, you scared me then. I was like, wait, otters have fingers.
I knew that part was just like.
It's a close enough animal. Yeah, so if you can do some form of gratitude practice, and then the other one I'd recommend is some form of introspection practice, which gratitude is in a way, but introspection just means turning your attention inwards. We live in a world and an economy where our attention is worth a lot to be kept outwards. It's why all social media sites are designed to be addictive. It's why, you know, TV is getting more and more dramatic. It's anything that can hold attention, right? But it astounds me. I'll talk to people when they enroll at the college and they're working on stuff, and I was like, when's the last time you checked in on yourself? And they're like, man, couldn't tell you. When's the last time you really looked inwards and answered some tough questions? They're like, man, couldn't tell you. But this is like, regardless of what happens externally to us, you're stuck with yourself for the rest of your life. It's that simple. And so learning how to navigate your mind and your emotions well. I was talking to one of our sophomore year members this morning. He's like, oh, I thought after, you know, this is my second year of study here. You know, I just didn't think I'd be having these difficult thoughts and feelings come up anymore. I'm like, whoa, man, like that's like saying, you know, I've spent a year learning sailing and I'm really pissed off that it's raining today. Like I thought if I got really good at sailing, it would stop storming when I was on the sea. It's like, we're not going to change the fact that we have difficult thoughts and feelings. Right? What we're going to get way better at is how we navigate them and how we manage them in healthy ways. That's the goal, right? That's how we become happier. So introspection is choose something that helps you check in with yourself and look inwards. My recommendations, journaling, just having a book where you get your thoughts out of your head. You don't have to solve them or change anything as a first step, just get them out. Meditation or mindfulness is the other one. And if you've tried it and you hate it, try it again, just try a different form of it. But some form of meditation or mindfulness, even if you use an app like Headspace or Calm to help you start with, is a crucial skill on building the other skills and tools of happiness. So yeah, what I've shared tonight is kind of like the foundation to build everything else on. Everyone who comes to college, I'm like, get really good at introspection, practice gratitude, learn the PERMA model, learn your types of happiness. And once you're doing that well, then you get to build the really cool stuff on top of it. but don't try to make other changes in your life or with your mind and emotions on shaky foundations. Right? So yeah, I guess I'll open up the room for any questions people have, any key takeaways, any things that resonated with them, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, bro.
You're welcome, man.
Gratitude, 2 years ago, gratitude was my lowest strength on signature strengths.
Oh, really? There you go.
Yeah.
Mine's spirituality.
Now it's number 19.
Hey, so it's 5 points higher, roughly. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, sorry, just ranks in my bottom 5.
Yeah.
It's like a 20% improvement.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to do it.
It's only one way to go.
Mine, my lowest 2 have been changing a little bit now. It was always historically, because they're pretty for like your character strengths. They don't move a lot. You can move them around a bit. Spirituality and humility have just been flipping at the bottom 2 for me.
I was thinking humility might be the other one.
Humility is lowest by far. Yeah, it's bottom 2. So
It was low for me too.
yeah. Hey, I'm proud of what I do. I'm bloody good at it. So
I love that.
so whatever. Have it, I really feel it.
Me too.
Yeah, there you go. Hope is up there too for you. There you go. Social intelligence up there for me. So perspective, humor, whether you believe it or not from tonight. But yeah.
What was yours, Matt?
I can't actually remember. I didn't bring my notebook sitting on the table at home ready for me to bring it tonight, which is helpful.
Did you do it last week? Is that
We
what
did it last week and I just tried to remember what they were.
Yeah.
It's
So,
the top 3, I think.
yeah, I did the online version as well. A little bit of difference. But
Well, I went to do the online version, but I only found one you had to pay for it.
There is a free one, yeah. VA character strengths. You've just got to put in your details so that, because what they're studying with that is like, do different cultures or demographics have particular strengths that were rewarded throughout their life? So it's like nature versus nurture argument. It's really cool. They're like,
Yeah, so one of the things that Dan spoke about 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about boys. He's a behavioural specialist. One of the big things that he talked about was using it with kids who have a lot of challenge in their life and just really like that haven't been recognised for anything. And I guess the example that he had was like you see really good leadership skills in girls all the time. All the time, the girls, like particularly let's call them troublemaking girls, they essentially get a group of girls together. They go and do, they organise them to do something sneaky and bad, blah blah blah, and so identifies like, man, you're a really good leader. Like you actually, great job at achieving that really like poor outcome.
Yeah.
And then trying to recognise those strengths in the kids and then go, all right, well, how do we use that for something that's a bit more productive or a bit more healthy for you, or positive experience for yourself and other people. So
You gave another great example of a kid who was a real bully.
yeah.
Whose number 1 was kindness.
Interesting.
And so then he said very, very simply, whenever he's caught that kid doing the wrong thing again, he said, hey man, this is really in line with kindness, isn't it? Yeah, well, how's this line up with kindness? And the kid go, shit, you're right, doesn't it?
That's kind of
got this kid to actually just start thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
In a way that meant something to him.
Yeah.
A way that somebody was telling him to think.
And then appeal to his strengths. Like, man, you're really good at that. And most of those
And we're not
kids,
using it.
most of those kids and us ourselves is like we probably don't really know what we're really good at, and to actually recognise that in particularly kids, is apparently super powerful.
Yeah, and that's kind of a next step with it too. Once you know them, gauging for your top 5 whether it's underutilized or overutilized, because like there is a healthy middle ground with it. Like you can overextend on some of them, or actually quite a lot of them. Like with hope, for example, if you overextend on hope, you can almost get into like delusional rose-colored glasses and not confront the reality of the situation, right? And if we underutilize it, that's also an issue. So in the case with kindness, he was obviously underutilizing a core strength of his. And so it's a nice little gauge to be like, hey, this is what you're inherently good at. Are you currently underutilizing it? It's very rare. I will say it's very rare that people are in a case where they're overutilizing a strength. But it's worth knowing about because it does happen.
But it's also, interestingly, in that example, you mentioned that the character strengths were a window to values or a precursor potentially.
Yeah.
You know, that kid obviously really valued kindness, possibly because he wasn't getting much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he's living a contrary life,
Yeah.
which is only going to cause him
100%.
grief.
100%. Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah,
Well,
questions, guys?
oh, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
What kind of questions is that test asking if it identifies that someone, maybe their highest value is kindness, but they're not acting in kind ways? How do you actually, what questions is
Yeah, so it's like a Likert scale thing of like, I think it's been a while since I did, but strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. And it just gives you a ton of situational questions of like, how much does this matter to you? How do you respond in this situation? Like all that sort of stuff. It takes about 25 minutes to do well. Like
Nice question.
yeah, it's nice and lengthy. But yeah, really well researched and backed up, which is why I like it.
Yeah, I think if you don't overthink it,
Yep.
you kind of go with your
Gut instinct.
bang, bang,
And
just sort of go with it, and then even and try not to be neutral.
yes,
I picked a lot of neutral things. I overthought a few things.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, yeah,
sometimes.
right. And it was like,
Yeah.
When I really thought about it, it was like, fuck this.
They do try to frame you at the start of it too, to say, hey, make sure you're answering this as you are now, not as your idealized version of yourself. Because a lot of people go through and be like, I'd like to say I always take care of others. And if you're like, well, actually, fuck, do I? Like, maybe not. Right. So they do try to frame it at the start, like, hey, try to be really honest with yourself here. Like, it's in your best interest. You're only going to lie to yourself.
It's like that, my wife's buying. So I think this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Honestly, like I actually think it's. I don't know if it would be a value of someone else doing it for you, but there's definitely some questions in it where I was like, one of the questions I think is like, do other people find you funny? It's like, well, fuck, I don't know.
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one simultaneously moves humor up and humility down.
Yes.
The most I think expensive, but also extensive leadership surveys we did with IHG, who were a fantastic company for helping their people develop, was called an LSI, and that has you, and then it goes to others as well.
Nice. Yeah.
And so you get yours, and then you get what other people.
And you can see if there's clash in it too.
Yeah, I think that would be valuable.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, unbelievably valuable. Yeah, you're suggesting who it goes to, so that can backfire or work unexpectedly. You know,
we do a similar one, basically upper management, simple management, and people below. Yeah, you get that perspective how everyone sees you at different
you're
levels.
right, Melissa. I did say you need to send it to 10 people, and they need to be this many there, this many there, this many there.
Yeah, and then you kind of go, wow, the people above me think I'm this, the people below me think I'm a prick. So that's where you
What
want
needs
that
to
level.
change.
Fuck, I rank humor so high, but it's like at the bottom.
Yeah.
Nobody's getting any.
Yeah. No, binge watching Netflix specials to work on your material. More meetings from here on, it will be a stand-up show.
Yeah,
exactly. Oh man. Any other questions? Get takeaways, guys.
What about the life noise dragging you down? You know, how do you deal with that? You know,
Yeah, I think this is. I was at a conference a few years ago, and someone asked a similar question of like, what if it's really external circumstance? And they're like, oh, well, you just shave your head, become a monk, and go live in the mountains. Like, but in reality, like, we're going to be navigating it increasingly. They call it VUCA. It's an acronym again, because we love acronyms in positive psychology. It means the world that we're living in is increasingly becoming more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Like, change is happening quicker and quicker and quicker. There's more and more noise out there. There's more challenge. I think, again, there's this idea of like internal versus external stability. If all the external noise is super unstable and we have an unstable internal environment, we're going to feel really unstable. But if we develop internal stability, if we work on how we manage our mind and emotions really well, we work on the things within our control, then we can navigate a lot more external instability and ideally play our part in trying to bring a little bit of stability to the external circumstances. Sometimes we use this analogy at BU of the raft and the river. Often in life, we're on our raft and then we don't like the way the river's going. And so we get frustrated, we lean out the raft, we try to paddle upstream, we get angry at the rocks that are going past, and we can, allow all these external things that are so out of our control, the economy, politicians, other people's behavior, like all these decisions that were made at work that we weren't consulted on. And we let that have full control over how we feel. That affects our internal world. Another saying that I pinched from one of my mentors is, no one can drive you up the wall until you've given them the keys to your car. And so it's like, who's in the driver's seat, right? And I think for a lot of us, we're simultaneously emotionally over-responsible to other people, particularly loved ones, kids, family, friends, our workplace, and we're emotionally under-responsible to ourselves. We don't take enough control where we can take control, and we try to exercise control in areas where we fundamentally can't control. Even something similar, I was training a sales team the other day on positive psychology and stuff, and I was like, it's not actually in your control if someone buys your product. So gauging your happiness and success on that is such a silly outcome. It's so far downstream. What's in your control is how educated you are on the product, how you communicate the value of it, how you show, that's all in your control. Focus on that, the rest takes care of itself. Go upstream.
I had a lady I was having discussions with recently, and she was helping her work through a problem that she had. She'd moved to Australia a short while ago, and they had lost a lot of financial security in the move here from the States. And she was having a really hard time with that because they'd taken a long time moving from South America to the US to build up this secure arrangement. She had a business in the States and then they'd come here, and she didn't have the business yet, didn't have her own money, they didn't own a house, and she was really struggling with it all. Anyway, we talked about it backwards and forwards, and in the end, she decided that one of the ways that she could really gain some control back over that, or better feeling about it, was just to over-index on the things she could do. And so she doubled down on, being budgeting responsibly and making sure that that budget allowed time for fun things and this sort of stuff, because she was scared that this financial instability would mean they'd lose the fun and the value that they had. But she just doubled down on things, acknowledging that there were ways to achieve all that without having, a house or a functioning business, because they weren't broke. And so it was just doubling down on what she could do. These things are out of my control for the moment, but I've doubled down on what I can do. And that was helpful.
Well, it's interesting. It's sharing one of my members today. It's like nearly every single major human culture and religion throughout history has had a lesson about knowing the difference between what's in our control and what isn't. And for anyone who's gone through like AA or like a Christian background sort of thing, it's the serenity prayer. Right? It's like, God grant me the strength to know what's in my control, and all the wisdom to know the difference between the two. I think it is a fundamental human skill to be like, okay, what's in my zone? Like, what can I take ownership for and responsibility of? And really, there's not much, right? It's how well you manage your internal state, so your mind and your emotions. It's the behaviors and decisions and choices you make day to day and how you choose to show up. That's kind of it. That's all that we can control out there. And then, the complete other end of that challenge is learning how to lead into acceptance and surrender for the stuff that's outside of our control. And that is a long-term journey. Actually, I think I saw you've got the happiness trap, Dr. Russ Harris, in the library over there. So he's an Australian psychologist who pioneered acceptance and commitment therapy. Highly recommend him. He's fantastic. That book is a really good starting point. The happiness trap.
I was going to ask all you guys, the hedonic versus eudaimonia. I think I've definitely fallen into the trap of, probably since we started the gym, of really just going hard at the second one and doing very little of the hedonic stuff. And I kind of actually feel, and I at times I've become resentful about that. And I think it sort of plays, because it plays into this this sort of archetype of delayed gratification and discipline and do the hard things and grit and determination, and then you do all those things and they never, none of those guys really ever talk about being happy, but I sort of feel as though I'm coming to a point where I'm becoming a bit more content and just being okay with where things are at.
Yes.
And I'm probably only just now starting to integrate a few more of the hedonic things.
Nice.
I think I think I put a lot of pressure on myself around the meaning and purpose, and not necessarily from a happiness perspective, but just like a service perspective. And this is what I want to do with my life, and that does fill me up. But I think you're right. Without some of the fun stuff, it's a bit fucked.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It's just like you said, like
It's an endless grind.
purposeful but bland life.
Yeah.
Scared.
You're like, well, fuck, that hit home. Yeah, man.
It's a bit boring.
Yeah.
And and if you're okay with bland, I love vanilla ice cream, but even that's got a bit of sugar in it.
Yeah. And vanilla bean if you get the good stuff.
And then come with some nuts or some oranges.
Who you said?
Yeah, that's maybe that's 20. That's
There's
why.
20%.
Fucking vanilla ice cream.
Sprinkle some ice.
And other stuff in it.
Delicious.
Fucking gold.
Oh man.
Yeah, you're welcome to ice cream.
He's gonna go home and be like, I've got my hedonic strategy.
It doesn't give you like fucking get shredded.
But isn't it always the case? I have elements of that same sort of attaching value to grit and resilience and abstinence and conservatism and quality. But for me anyway, behind all that is the belief that if I do that, all the good stuff will come.
Yeah.
So it's not an absence of wanting the good stuff.
Yeah.
It's just I have to do this to get it. Not go out and buy it now or invest in it now. I need to focus on these worthwhile, honourable things, and the good stuff will come later.
Yeah. So I'm curious.
So,
I'm curious to know from each of you guys, like, what do you think? Where do you think you sit in both those things? Like, I guess, feel free to give yourself a score out of happiness, and I guess how happy is that number one on your?
Oh yeah, actually,
how happy are you?
I should mention this. If you guys want to test this, like my team and I 4 years ago now built something called the happiness scorecard. It's free to take. It was our sort of gift to the world. We're like, we want this to be free forever. If you literally search happiness-scorecard.com.au, it'll come out. It's like a 7-minute test. You'll download I think it's a 7-page report afterwards that's individual to you. And it'll say, this is your overall happiness score. This is your score based on hedonic versus eudaimonic happiness. So we're sitting on each. This is your score based on internal factors that influence happiness versus external factors that influence happiness. And then it'll spit out at the bottom your top 3 happiness strengths that you're doing really well. Like, hey, this is massively contributing to how happy you are, keep doing them. And your 3 happiness growth opportunities. It'll say these are the 3 that you probably need to put a bit more love and focus into. It's free to do. And then at the end of it, I think you'll get some emails from us explaining more about the science of happiness. You can unsubscribe from them if you don't like them. If they add value, keep them there. And at the last page, it says, hey, if you want to learn more about this and go deeper one-on-one, then here's a link to book a one-on-one strategy session with one of our team. Happiness-scorecard.com.au.
So, because I'm going to ask all you guys now, and then
predict it and then find out how accurate you were.
So, just happiness is an overall ranking.
Yep.
And then
eudaimonic versus hedonic, so it'll split it. It'll say whether you're overbalanced in one or the other.
Yeah.
And we score out of 100 on them. So if you're like, hey, 61 for hedonic and 80 for eudaimonic, which might be similar to what you're at, right? It's like we need a little bit more hedonic or vice versa.
Cool. So, Matt, give yourself a score out of 10, because 10 is easier than 100.
Yep.
So happy, then you can give yourself halves or whatever. It's easily translatable. And then what you feel your ratio might be.
Okay, I think my score out of 10 overall would be 7.
I was going to say you can't choose 7.
Seven's
Seven's the
All right, that's the new rule. or you can't choose 7.
Okay, well then.
Is it more of a 7.5, 7 or a 6.5, 7?
6.5, 7.
Okay.
6.5.
6.5.
Yeah.
And then am I doing eudaimonic and hedonic out of 10 as well?
What's the split? Or
Yeah, because it splits them based on 100.
yeah. What's the split?
Okay.
So you can score each out of 100. Like that doesn't have to add up to 100. You could be 80 in both.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so then, hedonic, I would say 80. Eudaimonic 60.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you a 7.
You can't give me
I'm not
7.
gonna give you a 7. Probably realistically, probably say about 1. Yeah,
Yeah.
honest. Eudaimonic. 50. Hedonistic up to recently probably pretty high, but we've dropped a few of those things in the last couple of weeks. So right now, we sit about 50 as well, I guess.
Pete?
Probably a 4. Eudaimonic. Lemony 5. Hedonic.
I'm pretty high. I'm 8, 9,
Which is it? Pick one.
8.5. Eudaimonic definitely high for me. Probably about 8%, and then hedonic, probably 90% for eudaimonic, I guess, to be consistent with overall. And then hedonic, I go through probably binges, I would say, which is makes sense for hedonic. And so I don't know if that's with that be higher or lower.
Depends on how sustained. So yeah, you can meet hedonic's particularly an interesting one because you can meet it in really unhealthy ways, or you can meet it in ways that are really healthy and like sustainable. And so that will skew your score. Like
so my eudaimonic
daily.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, my hedonic is through the roof. Never had more dopamine in my brain.
Practically my eudaimonic, I think is all of my healthy behaviors, and my hedonic are practically all of my.
Interesting.
There's
cool.
not many things I do that I would classify as hedonic that I would also think are healthy.
Interesting. Yeah, cool. So that could be a cool growth area to like find things that are genuinely enjoyable, genuinely pleasurable, and don't have a big unhealthy after effect. For me, it's live music. Like live music and concerts is a huge hedonic boost for me. I have a come down afterwards because of the energy output, but it's like sustainably and long term in my life, going and seeing live music is not going to have that many negative consequences on my behavior. Travel's the other big hedonic one for me. A little bit of eudaimonic in there. I try to travel in a way that adds meaning and purpose to my life, but it's also just genuinely fun, be it local or overseas.
You score
70.
70 unhealthy.
Yes.
Chase?
I missed the 3.
Brief is give yourself a score out of 10 how happy you feel you are.
Okay.
And then you give yourself a score out of 100 for each of whether
Right.
It doesn't have to add up to anything.
Fucked up.
Yeah.
Okay. So
It's not a shit at that.
Yeah. Well, everyone's at like 130, 140.
And obviously this is where we're at the moment. Just this snapshot of time.
Yeah, snapshot.
Yeah. So probably 3. Just being straight up. Very much the same as you. The hedonic, I see there's hedonistic in my background. When I hear hedonistic, it's always the negative thing. But so this is a whole new concept that when you're talking about live music and everything, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that can also be 60. 60 hedonic. Definitely about 30 at the moment.
So,
Yeah, that's just been straight up on this one. Yeah.
I don't know if you're in here when I share as well, but my team and I built 4 years ago if you go to happiness.scorecard.com.au, it's a free test and it'll spit out your scores. Then it'll actually give you a 7-page report that's like, this is what your overall happiness is, this is what your hedonic is, so your internal, external contributors are, and also your top 3 strengths and top 3 gaps that you need to work on. So it's kind of like a very clear starting point for people.
So is it something like takes away from everyone else's time is not necessarily good for you, but
So eudaimonic's just based on, it's more about the underlying brain chemicals. So whereas eudaimonic is more like serotonin, oxytocin, hedonic is more built around dopamine. It's also built around not epinephrine. What's the other one? What's the one that comes when you exercise as well? It's endorphin. Thank you. Endorphin rush. So anything. So it's really going to be built around achievement and accomplishment. As a healthy way to get it. Sensory stimulation is a way to get it. So that's for me live music, but that's also where you get sensory stimulation through like drugs, right? And alcohol, which is probably not the long-term way to do it, right? That's not sustainable long-term. So anything that gives you a sense of achievement and accomplishment, anything that gives you that big rush of pleasure through sensory experiences, they're going to be your more hedonic approaches. And then you get to decide, well, what's sustainable here? Because realistically, you can hit sensory pleasure, pretty easily through a few different ways, but it's not going to be good long term.
So this is why it goes back to your original statement at the start, as we said, it's fucking hard to figure it out.
Man, I've been working intentionally on myself now and I still have coaches and mentors to this day. I think I always will, but it's coming up to 10 years now. Actually, I think it's just ticked over 10 years. And I've been professionally studying it close to 7 now, and professionally like teaching and sharing it now for like 5.5, 6. And I think I'm still learning. I hope I always continue to learn. It's effort. It's like I tell people training your brain and training your emotions like this. It's the exact same as training your physical body at the gym. No one exercises to a point where they go, shit, I'm feeling fit and strong now. I never need to exercise again. That's just not how it works. It's like, no, you're fit and strong because you're exercising. You kind of should keep exercising. It gets easier because you build a habit around it and you've got a better toolkit. But especially those early stages are tough.
Josh.
I struggle with happiness. So happiness, the closest I can get to defining happiness for me is contentment. So I guess that's probably
It's more eudaimonic side.
Yeah.
Probably stronger in you.
Yeah. So happiness, if I was to say, if you were to go, give me a happiness, Josh, I'd go 2, because I'm like, I don't know, like what is happiness? Contentment though, I would be 8. Yeah. So
that might be the split between your eudaimonic and happiness. Like your hedonic might be, if you think of traditional, and this is what I said at the start, a lot of people mistake. They think of happiness just as the hedonic happiness because we've been raised in a Western capitalistic culture. Interestingly enough, if you go to people in Eastern cultures that are more collective and you say, how happy are you? They immediately think of contentment. And then you've got to train them to think of the other side. And so it's the opposite for us, right? Because of the society we've been raised in, when you think happiness, you think yellow smiley face, dopamine, hedonic. And you've got to educate people that no, this other side is also happiness. Contentment is just another form of happiness. And so maybe if eudaimonic's higher, hedonic lower.
Yeah, definitely is, which is switched over the last.
Interesting. Yeah, cool.
Which is switched over there. So because of the way, so I'm a real estate agent by trade, right? So all of the training from that point of view has all been KPIs,
all hedonic,
gross income, all of that, which is all hedonic. And the reason even training anything like that, the way that I went about my life was actually proving other people wrong. So there's the hedonic stuff. Okay. So yes, but what I quickly learned over those periods of time is every time I earned more, or every time I hit the new goal, or there was no more happiness. So then I had to retrain myself and go, hang on, idea of what happiness really is actually based on, which you touched on earlier, is based on what other people have taught me happiness is. So it took a lot of work and a lot of unraveling to understand that even the way I do business now, I've got to do business in a way that creates more contentment, more flow. Because if I don't get into flow, I'm not content, and then therefore, if we want to call it happy, I can't stay in that happiness. So contentment and flow are like the number one priorities for me from that point of view, which is
going to be really cool to see in your test if because flow is one of the skills we test in it, and if that comes out in your top 3, I think you just be like, yep, called it. Yeah, it's going to be cool to see if that lands now in the top 3.
So I just wanted to preface that because it is actually something that I've struggled with my entire life, being able to, because if you ask my wife, she'll go, "You're not happy," and I go, "Yeah, I get that, happy." However, you define happy, probably not. But how I define contentment is, So I can't say that I'm happy, but content is a completely different framework for me, which I've had to do. Otherwise, I'd be a depressed mess because I'm like, I'm not fucking happy. I'm not happy. I'm not happy like everybody else wants to be happy. But that's just not my
happy smile like Declan fucking smile.
What do you mean categories of that contentment though? What, just grossly speaking, what?
Well, you know that I don't really go off categories. I go off feeling.
Okay.
So how am I feeling in life right now? So right now, if you ask me how do I feel in life right now, I have a great awareness that the last 2.5 weeks I have done this much of what I need to be doing to be able to get into flow state and contentment. And so I've got a big awareness of the fact that I went away with the kids. It was really intense and that was really hard work. And this week I'll get a head cold and I haven't trained for 2.5 weeks. And I haven't been on the beach every morning doing my gratitude process and my breath work and all of that. So I know why I feel right now, like really, really anxious, angry, and maybe a little bit depressed and reactive, and and not dealing with the kids the way that I normally would. But I've got the awareness that I know what I've got to do. I've just got to get over this. I've actually got to rest so that I can get back to doing what I do. Otherwise, you're just pretending doing that stuff as well, which is where you said earlier on from the gratitude point of view, the why. Because you go, I'm grateful for the food on the table today. Why? Just because somebody told me I should be grateful for it. So if I'm not in a good, if I'm not in a good energy space, that's the number one. So if you want to go category, what's the first one? Get your energy right. How do you get your energy right? First one is, like you said, look after your body, sleep, damn it, stop, damn it. Because the moment I sleep, the moment I actually take time out, like, how I sent that message, and I said, I know what I'm going to do. Today, luckily for me, I laid on the bed for 1.5 hours. I put in the music that I know, puts me straight into a sleep rest state. And I did that for 1.5 hours and I got back up and I was able to come here tonight and be in a completely different energy space to what I would have been this morning. So I guess if you want to categorize it, it's those things. But so it's completely changed because it was completely hedonic. It's like, this is how you get happy. You get the car, you get the highest grace fees, you get this, you get the house, you do the development, you do that. And then my daughter came and I'm like, this isn't happiness. Because I'm just all invested over here. But I just actually just 100% want to be invested here. This stuff actually doesn't matter to me. It's important, but I have no connection to that. So the KPIs and hitting all of that, like today, that sale that I told you about, everybody else is all excited about it. And I'm just like, yeah, cool.
I'm excited for that.
But you see what I mean? For me, it doesn't matter. I could go and do a $60 million deal tomorrow. Some people would get so excited about it, and I just go, yeah, cool. So that stuff doesn't get me in here like this, which is where we go here, right? So let's call it 90% for eudaimonia, and probably 30% for hedonic. That's where I had to completely shift the way that I think about my life, the values of my life. Actually, what's important to me? Well, I don't know because I don't know me.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, everything that you've said from that point of view, it's like, yeah.
Can I ask though, Declan, the hedonic, because Keith and Jace both had a tendency to think of hedonic as negative.
Yeah.
Josh is almost saying a similar thing.
Yeah.
Because hedonic could also be, right, wonderful afternoon with your daughter.
Correct. But it depends.
Laughing and happiness with your daughter.
Yeah.
Laughter.
Yeah.
That's hedonic.
Laughter's hedonic.
It's not just
Yeah.
cash and the next goal.
Yeah. And I think something to potentially be
It could be
mindful
your
of.
moment on the beach in the morning
Yeah.
is hedonic.
Because it's a
Is that
sensory,
right?
it's a sensory and pleasurable experience, which is more hedonic. Something to be mindful of here, and it happens every time there's psychological change. You know, Newton's cradle, like the 5 silver little balls with one up and they go and it overcorrects. Every single time we make psychological change in our life, that's the process we go through. So what's probably happened here, and I'm judging just off hearing this story, like I don't know your life like you know your life, but we had this period where we were very heavily invested in hedonic happiness in the form of achievement and outcome and sales and whatever it may be. We've gone, hang on, that's not working for me. And we've entered this period of overswing, which the reason I think it's not potentially an overswing is you're reconnecting with eudaimonic, which is really meaningful and really valuable. The thing that warns me it might be an overswing is like, if you sell a $60 million deal, it's very natural and human for you to feel excited about that. And the fact that you're like, it means nothing to me, I'm like, okay, we might be in a bit of a eudaimonic overswing. And so it's about finding what our middle ground looks like. Of like, how do we enjoy both? Because they both matter.
Let me reframe that then. The $60 million deal doesn't matter, but what I do with that matters.
Cool. Yeah, nice. Yeah, beautiful.
So it's not the thing.
Yes, it's what it allows.
It's that's right.
Yeah, cool.
So
The reason I asked was my hedonic, what did I say, 80?
yeah.
I haven't kicked any amazing goals or earned $1 million recently.
Yeah, but you find the moments of joy and pleasure.
Sometimes.
Yeah, it's amazing moments of joy and pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the difference to think about is a joyful life and a content life. Put them together, you get fulfillment.
Yeah.
We want little moments of joy, but we want that base of contentment too. Massively so. That's why I joke that it's the old El Paso type.
So can I reframe? Can I ask the question around
Yes,
that?
sir.
Because I would love to know what, because everybody's definition of happiness is something, and what you've just said there is the mixture of joy and contentment, and that's both of those 100% important in my life. So where you touch on, you know, having the time with your children, that type of thing, that's really important. And yes, until you did shine light on that, I probably would have like heavily put that in you.
Yeah. You want to,
Because
yeah.
it's a part of that.
It's as well, like you know, when you go away on holidays with the kids, that's a fucking chore. It's like this weekend we go away, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna have a good time this weekend because it's like, that's why
2 weeks ago.
yeah, that's why it's actually very Jay, so it might give you a glimmer of focus and pleasure. And yeah, I just want to highlight that. Yeah, that's I'm with you.
Yeah. However, like, so I'm just trying to get the definition right on this because I want to get clear on that. Because
That's why I
like just like this afternoon where we talk about the flow of my day.
Yeah.
Now, instead of like once upon a time before kids, it was 12 hours a day going hard and actually getting the KPIs and doing that. Now it's like, how do I get the same results? But put only the amount of energy that I need to into this part of my life so that I can do things like today and take Aiden to get his red stripe and almost cry just watching him get his red stripe because it was such a big achievement just to get him there from Thursday to this week, to get him there as many times for him to do it and see how that is. So that's the joyful part for me. That is. But I struggle defining that as happiness though.
Yeah, well, maybe your approach to hedonic happiness or joy and achievement, it sounds like was historically very linked to career. And now we're questioning that. Now we're changing that. Like, how else do we get joy and achievement in our life if not through our career path? Right? Because we need to think of how do we get these in different domains of our life too. And traditionally, stereotypically for, you know, Western men, we do lean a little more hedonic. We also lean a little more, how do I get it from my work? Right. And so it just sounds like you're going through a really cool process of like rediscovering that and rewriting and being like, my approach to getting that joy and accomplishment maybe is no longer as tied as heavily to like KPIs and career oriented stuff, but I can get it in these other ways.
Still positive affect.
Yeah.
What are the things that make me,
Feel good, feel elation, feel excitement, enjoy it. Yeah.
what are the things that make me feel good?
Yeah.
Hedonistic.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Correct.
This makes me feel good now.
Yeah. Nice.
Under that, I have comfort and confidence in my sense of values and the fact that I'm making a difference to those that know me and care about me.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I'm having a ball.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes my
If that's the definition of
Yeah.
that,
yeah.
then that would put me more at 70
Nice. Yeah. Fantastic.
on hedonic, because I
And simultaneously dropped my course hedonic by 30.
That's why I was hoping.
put 75 in.
Just one more.
So,
What's you need? I was still waiting for happiness.
Yeah,
no, I said,
do the test and wait to see what happens.
make more of a definition of that.
Yeah.
Because I was struggling with what that actually meant. So, but just, yeah.
Just
but
do a test.
That's how I scored myself.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Because we do reframe it that way, those little wins.
Yeah.
You know, the makes
Moments
me
of
feel
joy.
like, which is my meditation, breath work and all of that, and sex with my wife, all of that sort of stuff, like, well, that's really important. And if that's a part of, we would reframe that as hedonic, then yeah, there's plenty of that.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
It's just coming in areas not so much aligned with career at the moment, which is cool. Like it's just a big change. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I need to run soon. Speaking of commitments to
Thanks, mate.
the overseer of your happiness has decided that you're allowed to have a 6 this time.
I just have one idea.
Yes,
So I was
sir.
reflecting on my day and I would say it was like pretty happy. But then when I thought about it, I was like, well, I was really stressed about university. I had a girl saying last weekend and now she's gone. And so I kind of feel like I'm missing her a bit. And so, and I went and exercised and that was hard. So I've had these experiences today that were actually hard, but the reason I said it was a happy day is because I've had a level of detachment where I feel like I'm on purpose and doing my thing and all of it's just the process, those feelings. Whereas when I fall into a state that I would describe as hedonic would be when smoking weed for a week straight and eating cake, and now those feelings are so intense that I can't disconnect from them and I'm actually pulled into it. And so maybe it's I don't know if it's possible to have a 10 in hedonism and a 10 in
it is.
in eudaimonic, or if you think it is, or
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Because your eudaimonic, think of the best way to think of it is it's a buffer. Right, maybe I should have figured this more clearly, right? So like hedonic does that, right? Like it spikes and drops. Eudaimonic has that shape curve, right? So it's longer. But what's interesting is if you have a bedrock of eudaimonic and then you top it up with some achievement, accomplishment, joy, pleasure, whatever it may be, this happens to the crash. It rebounds off your eudaimonic base. So it's almost like a protect. So like what you described there is like, yeah, today had moments of challenge, but as you said, I was connected to the purpose of them. I was like, so we've got this nice little base of eudaimonic or contentment or whatever you want to call it, meaning, purpose, right, connection. And so then when we still have our little drops from it, like we can just bounce back up, right? And that's why like both are really needed.
Yeah, but I also feel like because today I didn't go and smoke weed or drink a 6-pack of beer or something like that, that's why I didn't all crash through that.
Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. Yeah. So
Mine,
yeah,
I
maybe.
was going to give myself an 8, and I reckon I'll probably give myself 90 eudaimonic, and I reckon probably like 20. I was thinking 10, but I thought I might pump myself up to a 20. Give myself 15. Hedonic. That's I just think for me, there's a joy, and there's some of these words have just really penetrated through to me tonight. Something I've been speaking about for years was finding more joy and not knowing how to get that, because I thought the way to find joy was also to do all these eudaimonic things. And I was like, it's not bringing me fucking joy.
Yeah. Lots of meaning, lots of purpose, lots of
things. I'm doing the fucking things, and I'm not fucking happy.
Yeah.
And I guess like that just that fulfillment, like like the biggest times of fulfillment for me are sometimes like sitting in the gym at the end of a long day. It's been a tough day. I've done a whole heap of eudaimonic stuff. I've maybe coached some sessions which I really loved, and I was like, fuck, that was the best day. Perfect. So that's really But I was just thinking of like other times when people feel it's. I've spoken about this to a few people, like people are at soccer games and they're just like so fucking passionate. They're like, they're riding their wave, and I'm just like, man, how do I have that much joy in my life? Like, how do I get to that level of just pure fucking? And I was just thinking about it, like, so like even for like when we gave birth to the kids, when Sam gave birth, like I didn't have this overwhelming joy for the moment. It was just like this is pretty cool. But it wasn't just like, I just didn't have that feeling that some people have. And I was like, what's wrong with me? But one of the things I was, to sort of Keith's point, like, I always think, would you describe like a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, like, do you think that small children almost encompass the perfect balance a lot of the time of like, like if you look at their like contentment, just reading a book and just loving life, and they're just fucking running around the house without a care. It's like cool, like that's
safety, security, sense of belonging, unconditional love, all that baseline stuff. But
almost, almost think of that as like
it depends on the environment that the kid's raised in. Like it would be too general of a statement to say that kids automatically have it. It's nature versus nurture. But if they're in a good environment, good household, like, you know what I mean? Like, good parenting, then they actually encapsulate it very well. Ironically, there's been a bunch of studies around the question, does having kids make you happy? I don't have kids yet, but I love telling parents this. So your hedonic happiness plummets when you have kids. And it takes about 18 to 20 years to get back to where it was before you had kids. Right? But your eudaimonic happiness progressively goes up consistently over the whole time you're a parent. And so the trade-off, which I was like, more people need to be spoken about this, people having kids, is like,
I say this to my
you are going to sacrifice joy and pleasure for the next 20 years.
You get to 20 years and then you buy a dog.
Yeah, it's like, but you have more meaning and purpose.
That's so true. I'm so glad you said that.
It's a very
I always talk about it. It's like, it's a fucking grind.
You're going to warn people.
I was fucking deep in despair, and the language I was using was, how many fucking times?
All the people who do have kids
assumed that I knew how bad this was going to be.
Don't start telling everyone, hey, you're going to sacrifice pleasure and joy for 20 years, but you're going to have a lot more meaning and purpose. That's your trade-off. That's your trade-off.
You're going to have heaps of meaning and purpose in your life, but everything else is going to be fucked.
Congratulations on the birth of your child. Here's a poster for you to hang in your house.
Another day about like Jordan Peterson. He said he said, by the time you've had 2 kids, you're fucked. So you may as well have the 3rd.
And then go and have 8 because anyway.
Thanks for listening to the Junto Men's podcast. Our mission is to share high-quality information for regular blokes who either want to be better or who might be going through some tough stuff. We really hope you got some value out of listening today. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So if you did get some value out of today, we'd love it if you left us a comment, we read them all, you shared it with a mate, or even gave us a 5-star review. We love getting those. If any of what we have spoken about today was interesting to you and you'd like to know more about what we're about and what we do, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or on our website in the links in the notes. We'll hopefully talk to you soon. Cheers.